This is the Arp kit for the head studs. I was curious to see what this was going to end up being. I got it from Vintage Inlines from Matt Cox. And I was curious if it was actually an ARP kit number that ARP offered that wasn't on their website. I didn't call ARP, but it's not. And as a matter of fact, not only that, the research that I've done, CS150 is Clay Smith. So I think Clay Smith puts this kit together, and I think Matt gets them from Clay Smith. I'm not sure, but if I was betting man, which I am, that's what I would say. So ARP doesn't have an official kit. I think Clay Smith probably puts these together, and I suspect it's just because it's standard 4-inch studs. So let's take a look at what we got. This comes with the standard ARP stud instructions. If you've ever bought any head studs, main studs, rod studs, if you buy any of that from ARP, they give you this tag. I'll show you that in a little bit. And it tells you exactly what to torque them to, and it gives you any specific instructions, like the Edelbrock heads that are on my big block that has a special head stud kit for those. Or actually, I use bolts on that because of the access issues. But on that bolt kit, it told me some specific things. Comes with the ARP Torque Lube. And here's the studs. And those look like they're 4-inch studs to me. Super high quality as usual. It's just, I've said it before, ARP makes the best stuff. They really do. They tell you to put them in hand tight. I don't know why it's got an Allen key on it. I guess if it gets hung up and you can't get it in by hand, you could do it with a regular Allen key. You don't want to tighten these down with a socket, or you don't want to wrench down on them into the head. They're really designed to just be, they're just designed to be hand tight. Comes with all the hardware. Here's the nuts and the washers. Pretty typical stuff. So there is one of these, and they're all the same. If I'm looking at them correctly, they all look exactly the same to me. This stud, being as they're all the same length, one of them goes into the water jacket where the water pump impeller is. And I believe it will hit the impeller if you don't grind the stud off. I imagine that's because this isn't an official kit from ARP. I bet if ARP sold this kit for this motor, they'd probably give you one stud that was minus 2 or 3 threads, so it doesn't hit the impeller. Because when it goes down in there, it goes right into the impeller jacket for the water pump. So I'm going to have to grind one of these. I'll probably, the way I do them usually is I'll cut it with a hacksaw or my grinder, my cut-off wheel, and then I'll dress it real nicely. I hate having to do that, especially one that goes in the water jacket, because these are coated and it removes the coating, so I don't like that, but that's just the way it is. They don't make a special stud for this that's shorter. So while we're waiting for the head, we'll get the head studs installed. I want to make sure I keep up on my promises too. I think I told you I'd let you see the instructions. This is a general head stud instruction. I can tell I've installed enough ARP fasteners to know, what a general card looks like and what one that's specific to a certain application looks like. So these they tell you go to 80 foot-pounds with them, so that's 5 foot-pounds over what the manufacturer says, what Ford says for this head, which is good. A little extra torque never hurt anything. Studs provide much better torque anyways. And yeah, they're 7/16 diameter. This is all pretty general. Like I said, screw studs into the block, hand tight only. They tell you can use Loctite on them. You only need the thread sealer. That's the other thing. You only got to put the thread sealer on the one that goes into the water jacket. And on these motors, it's only one of them. Unlike a big block Chevy where I think every single one of them goes into a water jacket. Small blocks the same way. This only has one. So all the other ones, you could put them in dry. I may just put a little bit of lube on them just so they go in, so they just screw into the head easy by hand. But you don't need to seal them or anything. They're blind holes at the end. So what you do want to make sure is you clean out those holes really well. Now, it's not as critical for the studs because the studs are going to torque from the top mainly, from the top end of the stud, but you still want to make sure that they're clean. Look, it's just best practice. Make sure that the holes are clean. You run a cleaning tap through them. So anyways, that's a ARP stud kit. Okay, so we're just taking a look at this one stud that goes in to where the water pump impeller is. You can see it if I get the light just right. You see the impeller sticking out right there. So it does in fact hit it. It hits it quite a bit. I just ran it down real easy just to see where it would stop. So let's take a quick look at this with the stud. I'll show you what it looks like. And I already ran it down, and the stud goes all the way down in the other one. So you're going to see where this one stops. It's pretty obvious here. If I could just get this thing to focus. So that's it right there. So now I could probably get a pretty good idea with just doing that, where I can see I'm probably going to have to cut off 3 threads to get appropriate clearance. We can get even scientific with it, though. If I pull that out. Let's get my handy-dandy gauge here. And we can get a depth on it. And then I want probably... So, let's see. Where am I hitting it? Right there. And I want to get it as far to this direction as I can because this is the top of the radius. So you'll see what I mean if I roll this. Yeah, this depth gauge isn't staying there, but let me get this a little bit closer for you guys. The gauge comes, see how the gauge is coming up because I'm riding up the side of the impeller. So we want to get all the way to this side. And that'll give us a decent idea of the depth. It might be better if I do it this way. Yeah, because the gauge is slightly bent that direction. So I can actually see what my depth is to the top of the water pump. Right there. So it looks like I've got, what, just shy of an inch? Yep, basically 1 inch. So we don't want to go to 3/4. I'm thinking 7/8. That'll give me 1/8 of clearance, right? So if I take 1/8 of an inch off of here, then I know I've got 1/8 of an inch of clearance. So, well, actually, I don't know how long the thread is on here, do I? Guessing it's 1 inch. Yeah, it's about 1 inch. It's actually less than, the threaded area is less than 1 inch, but where that taper is, where the thread tapers, that will actually sit down into the hole. So, yeah, let's start by taking about 1/8 of an inch off of it, which is going to be probably about 2.5 threads. So we'll cut it off. Well, geez, why didn't you guys tell me it wasn't in frame? Yeah, we'll take about 1/8 of it off to start, and we'll go from there. We don't want to take too much, but there's still plenty of meat here. I mean, being as it's a stud and everything, you know, I could probably take 1/4 of an inch off of it safely. But let's start with 1/8 of an inch and see where that lands us, and we'll see if we're still hitting. Because what we don't want to do is when you go to, you know, get it all looking fine and everything, and then when you go to torque it down and the stud rolls in a little bit more, you don't want it to roll in and hit the. You don't want it to roll in and hit the impeller when that happens. The other thing I could do, too, another thought, as I'm thinking and talking as usual, I could just measure to the bottom of the threads, and that's it. You need 1 thread maybe outside of the threaded part of the deck. Let's try that. Maybe that's an even better idea. Of course, I don't know if I want to make it that short, but yeah. Yeah, I might want to make it that short, actually. That water pump impeller is very close to the top of the deck, so I may just take a measurement there of the actual threaded material. I'll need 2 hands, but I'll measure that, and I'll just cut the stud down to that length. So I went ahead and I checked the depth of the deck depth, mouthful, and it's 11/16, and that's leaving a little extra. So I'm going to be a little bit conservative here. I'm not going to take it all the way up to the chamfer of where the threads rolled. I'm going to take it down a little bit, so I may have to grind off a little for dressing. But that looks like, if I line it up here, it looks like I want to go to the second thread. So I want to basically take off 2 threads. So I'm going to put this up in my bench vise, and I'm probably just going to cut it by hand. We'll see. This stuff is hard. I mean, it's very hard. So we'll see if I can cut it with my hacksaw, just because it does a little bit better job. It doesn't heat it up as much either. And you really don't want to heat these studs up like that with the die grinder. It's really not good for them. So yeah, we're going to cut off probably 2 threads. Just a quick note too, these are aluminum jaws that are good for this kind of thing. You can get these on Amazon pretty cheap. Just, you know, you don't want to crank this down in there. You'll ruin the stud if you do that. You'll flatten the thread. So this works real good for that. All right, so we went ahead and we lopped that off, and I used a 32 tooth hacksaw blade, and then I dressed it about another thread with my bench grinder. And I used 2 stones on it. I used a heavier one to kind of take it down 1 thread, and then I used my lighter stone to really smooth it out. Came out really nice as it can be for something that was cut off at home. And I ended up right at the dimension that I mentioned. I think I said 11/16. And so the other thing I did, I went ahead and I popped the belts off of here. We triple, quadruple, we triple, quadruple want to check that we don't have any interference. So let's go ahead and run this down. And that's about, that feels like that bottomed out. Now let's just double check. I am going to use the Allen key for this, just to be sure. I am going to tighten it just a little bit because I want to be sure that I'm not going to hit when we torque this thing down. I want to make sure it's nowhere near it. I don't hear anything, and that's probably not going to get much tighter than that with it torqued. Could, but it's pretty much bottomed out in the deck. So, I mean, you know, I could turn it that much. I don't want to deform the hole though, but still no evidence of it turning. So I think that we're in pretty good shape there. So that's the only one that really needs special attention. All the other ones, they just go straight in. So now we've got one custom stud for the one hole that it needs to be. I want to show you guys something too while I'm prepping this for studs. Most of the holes were relatively clean, but there was a few of them. This one, I ran the screwdriver, and this is after I've kind of cleaned it out with some acetone, and it is just filled. I don't know if you can see that or not. This one's filled with dirt and rust. This doesn't go through or anything, but you know, over time that stuff builds up in there. I mean, it's pretty bad. Let's blow it out and let's see. Let's see if let me see if I can do this here. Let's see if the camera will pick this up. Yeah, you really couldn't see anything there, but it's, where's my flashlight? It's relatively clean down in there now, but this was packed with crap, you know, at least 1/8 of an inch. If you let that happen and you're using bolts, now the studs, it probably would have been okay. But if you're using bolts, that'll give you a completely improper torque. So I'm going through these and checking them all really carefully. Even though I'm using studs, it really doesn't matter. I'm still going to clean them out really well. So now, if I did my job right, and as with the 3 that I've put in so far, you can put these studs in. You shouldn't need the Allen key to turn it. Like if it gets stuck halfway down, I'm noticing I may have cut, I'm a little concerned about this one. I may have cut a little too much off of this stud because the chamfer's going all the way down. These are bottoming out before that. I don't think it really matters. I've still got 3/4 of an inch of bolt here of engagement of thread. I think it's probably fine, but You know, I don't want something stupid like that to screw this up. I don't think that it will, though. But anyways, if I did my job right, this is going to run all the way down if I clean these correctly. And see, that one's getting a little bit tight, so I might not have done my job well there. Okay. I need to check that hole again. I also need to check this hole again. This is the one that had the rust in it. So let's see. That one runs all the way down, so that's good. So I want to check these. Now, it's not, like I said, with the studs, it's not that critical. I'm just being very particular, and I'm trying to teach you something too, because if you got bolts, that'll give you a false torque right there. And that's probably what was wrong with this thing. There's at least 2 holes that were too tight, and that sets your torque wrench off. Now, because on the studs we're relying mainly on this thread, well, should be all of it should be relying on the torque on this thread. It's far more accurate because you don't get, with the bolt, you're dealing with all the twists that happens in the bolt, and that gives you false torque values. So, but these seem to run all the way down just fine. It's just I'm going to have to go back through and check these. So this guy was definitely a problem. I ran the tap. It felt like it had bottomed out when I went to clean it, and it hadn't. It was actually stuck on crap. I had to really run my cleaning tap up and down there. By the way, don't use cutting taps. I think I said that already. Don't do that. You need to use thread cleaning or thread chaser taps. I happen to buy the ARP ones, which are probably overpriced, but you know how it is. You're always trying to get your Summit order up to $100 to get free shipping. So instead of paying $9 for shipping, I probably paid $9 for a tap. So that one was a problem. This one was a problem. And both in the rear were a problem, which doesn't surprise me because that's where we were seeing the leak back there. False torque. You know, that's definitely the explanation here. I'm going to hold off on putting this guy in until I get the head, just because I don't want to put the thread sealer on there and not have it under load and have the thread sealer dry out. So we'll wait to put that in there till we get the head back. But we did get the threads, or excuse me, we did get the studs installed, and I think I've got all the parts now that I need. I think the last of the stuff came in. I decided I'm going to replace the valve cover while it's off. It's in pretty bad shape. I was going to get the original one chromed because the chrome ones that are out there, I'm sure the gauge, whatever gauge steel they use probably isn't near as thick as what they used to use. And I did check it. I bought a Scott Drake chromed valve cover, and even with the wrapping paper on it, it was about 10 ounces lighter than the original Ford one. But I took the original Ford one over to the local plating place to get it chromed. They quoted an astronomical amount of money. It was 10 times what a new valve cover cost, so I couldn't justify it. So, but they did a really crappy job of painting the original one, and I just, you know, they painted the whole engine blue after it was all assembled, gaskets and all. I hate that, you know. And I guess I could sandblast the original one, but I'm not going to. I just bought the Scott Drake one for $40-50, and we'll throw that on there. So, yeah, it's just waiting for the head. Yeah. Great. And no, I'm not going to put a header on it. I just ordered another one. So we'll just do a quick comparison here. This is the original valve cover from the car, 1966 valve cover. No grommets, nothing in it. 3.88 pounds. This is the new Drake valve cover with the PCV and the grommet in it, which doesn't have a whole lot of weight. And I also installed the slip-over breather adapter. And we're at 3.57. So, you know, it's lighter. It's definitely not as thick gauge steel. The other thing I don't like about it is it doesn't have the raised ridge around here like the original one does. So I'm kind of curious to see if this thing leaks. But, you know, I wasn't going to pay $400 to have the original one chromed. What's that you say? You want to see me weigh more stuff? Okay. So we're right around 10.25, 10 and a quarter pounds for the original exhaust manifold with the hardware on it. We got the new exhaust manifold just came in. Let's give it away. Let's see how it sizes up. Almost 10 and a half, so it's a little bit heavier. And I'd venture to guess it's because they've made some improvements to this design. You'll notice instead of it having a cast depression here, it's been machined. That's a good thing. It makes it stronger. If you look at the old one, it's actually got a cast depression right here. Let me see if they did that anywhere else on here. It's interesting. There's still a cast depression here. It must have been too far to machine it. So that's interesting. But supposedly this is a better design. It's got better flow. I mean, come on, this thing's a joke. Why am I not putting a header on it? Look, it's a stock car. I'm going for reliability. I don't want the extra heat under the hood. I don't have to do header wrap. I put headers on everything that I've got except for this. So it's machined here on the bottom as well. I guess that's another good place to look. Let's take a look at this guy. Yeah, this one's got cast depressions in it. So yeah, I mean that probably does help because those depressions do go into the ports, where you probably notice on this one it does not. It's flat. So it's hard for you guys to see that, but it is indeed flat in there. So I'm probably going to clean this surface up maybe just a little bit. Maybe I won't monkey with it. It's getting a Remflex gasket anyways, but I mean, look at that. Hold on. Let's take a look at this shit. Nice. How do they expect that to seal? Okay. Well, yeah. That's awesome. It's not that bad. It's going to seal with a Remflex gasket on it, but that's annoying. Seriously. A bunch of people shouting, send it back, send it back. I don't have time to send it back. So, what's going on? I don't think that that's going to be a problem there, though. Those Remflex gaskets pretty much will take care of that. But you couldn't run that with a stock gasket. I'll tell you that right now. That thing would blow out right there. That's pretty ridiculous, though. But it'll compress so far in there. Those gaskets are awesome. So, but, you know, that's high quality of Scott Drake right there. This video is going to just be so scattered just because I'm working on a lot of different stuff right now and I'm busy at work and I'm working on it literally 15 minutes a day. I'm still waiting to get the head back. I should have it back today. Waiting for a call, if not tomorrow, which is Friday. So we'll see. I got to really looking at the shaft rocker assembly and a few things on this if you don't know. I would have never guessed, but you can't just go out and buy these rockers. They don't make them. Nobody makes them. They are a reconditioned item. And with that, there is a company up in Redding, California, which is about 8-hour drive for me, but I'm having it shipped. Rocker Arms Unlimited. And they rebuild shaft rockers. I think they are the shaft rocker rebuilder. I mean, I don't know that anybody else does it, but I got to really looking at this, and most of them aren't too bad, but, you know, it's definitely got some wear on it there. And I got to look, and this is probably the worst one right here. It's too deep. It's just too deep. These need to be addressed. They need to be dressed at least. But, you know, I think they cleaned this up when whoever rebuilt this engine, you know, did a fair job on the machine work. But boy, their assembly was just not great. It looks to me like they cleaned this up. The bolts, you can tell the bolts have still got quite a bit of dirt in the threads, so they probably didn't clean them real well. You know, maybe they just did a quick parts washer thing, but they didn't really, you know, take a nylon brush with some solvent to really clean these out. Or even a wire brush. But this shaft rocker, it's time, you know, it's never been rebuilt. It's the original one, you know, that there's not a terrible amount of play here, but this shouldn't be this loose either. So, but what really concerns me is the tips. The tips are definitely worn out. They need to be resurfaced. This one's pretty bad. They're all pretty bad. You know, now that doesn't make a huge amount of difference, but it can make some. You know, hydraulic lifters are going to compensate for it, but you know, it's extra wear. It starts throwing the geometry off. It starts digging a groove in. That'll be hell on my new valves that are going in here too. I'm getting nice swirl polish valves put in my head, and you know, that's no good. So, and the where the push rod balls sit on a few of them, you can see where this thing was rusty in its previous life, where it sat for a long time. A couple of the push rods have rust on the end of them, and that's chewed away at the rocker arm sockets. So anyways, I called up Rocker Arms Unlimited, got a hold of Gary. He's one of the owners. Nice fellow. Had a great conversation with him. And because I use the non-adjustable ones, he said I don't even need to send the core. He's got enough cores of these where he doesn't need mine. So he's just going to ship me a new one. It was a totally reasonable price. And it'll be done correctly. They plate the shaft. They bronze bushing the rockers, you know, so they resurface everything. Everything's all cleaned up correctly. The stands, they clean up the stands. So that's going to take me a couple of days to get, probably, because I'm just here in LA. He can get it to me relatively quick, but give them a call, man. I'll tell you, they really know their stuff. I can just tell by talking to them. So anyways, yeah, we got a new shaft rocker on the way. I went ahead and I primed this with a high temp primer. This is the new exhaust manifold. As you saw, the other one's cracked. I used Krylon high heat primer. This is exactly what this is for. Exhaust systems up to 2,000 degrees. I had to special order the black high heat Krylon to go with this. So I went ahead and I primed it a couple of days ago because it's good to let it dry. And I should have the can of black high heat tomorrow. So we'll go ahead and we'll get this coated up. If I get the head back, the head can absolutely go on. I will, of course, I'm dropping everything. I will get the head put on. We'll shoot that. I'm thinking I probably won't get a video out this weekend, but that's okay. But we'll shoot that. We'll get it all bolted up, get the exhaust all back on it, put everything else on that we can. Luckily, the only thing this holds us up from putting in really is itself and the valve cover. So we should be able to get it most of the way back together while we wait for new shaft rocker assembly. But anyways, that's a good thing to check. You know, I could have run this. I absolutely could run this, but you know, I want this thing to last, and this is not the right way to do this. Especially now that I'm putting new valves in it. I don't know if the valves were replaced before or not, but they certainly will be now. And this is the right way to do this. Do we clean up the aftermath from last night? Or do we put the head back on? I agree. Let's put the head back on. Just picked it up. Got the Viton seals in it. New springs, swirl polish valves, 3-angle valve job, hardened seats, head's been checked, Magnaflux, no problems, new push rods, and I picked up a couple cans of engine paint, and we'll get it painted up, and we'll slam this bad boy back on. Probably could make all you Ford guys cringe. Could have painted it Chevy Hugger orange, but I didn't, and it wouldn't match. Actually, I really do like Ford blue. I never understood why Chevy painted their engines orange. That's why I always paint my Chevy engines black. So we're all painted up. This is VHT Ford blue engine paint. You know, it's high temperature for, you know, engine purposes. You know, like 550 degrees it's rated to. You can use barbecue paint. I've used that before, but this stuff is, you know, I was driving back from the machine shop, and I saw an AutoZone, and I turned in real quick and just ran in and grabbed some because, you know, they had boiled this thing. Obviously, you saw it was all bare. So we're waiting for this to kind of harden up a little bit, and I'm starting to prep the surface of the block. I had treated it with WD-40, and so I'm just going to leave the 4 studs in front and rear for right now. We'll put the rest of the studs in after the head's on there, because trying to get them all to line up, if you've ever done studs before, can be real challenging. So I got to get the WD-40 off here now that it's now that we're ready to put it together. But the surface prep's all done. You know, it's been cleaned. And I'm going to pull all... Oh, don't forget to do this. And some people do. If you put rags or whatever in the, you know, like intake ports, you know, if you're doing a V8 or, you know, like this where you have the pockets for the lifters, don't leave that in there, because you're gonna hate life when you find out that you did that. So, you know, make sure... I know it seems obvious, but sometimes people don't, you know, they get moving too quick. It's a good idea to kind of run slow when you do this. So, yep, let me clean this up, and I got to clean the bottom of the head because I'm sure that there's some overspray that leaked under it and whatnot. So we're going to clean it real good, and we're going to use... I decided I am going to put a Felpro on here. I have a Male gasket for it, which is a Victor, but I don't know. I was just thinking about it, and I think... with the studs in it, I think the Felpro's fine. So let's get that going on. All right, we're getting real close to putting this head back on. Clean the surface really well. I've got acetone in my sprayer right now. I've talked about that before. Those things are great. Clean it again, clean it a third time, and then when you think that it looks perfectly clean, clean it one more time. Look for anything on the surface, little sticky spots, stuff like that. You know, anything that looks like it might be a problem. There are a couple of things that didn't come out of here, but they're on the inside of where the gasket will sit, so I'm not worried about that. There's one little area in the casting that was a defect. It's like it's like right there. That's not going to hurt anything, especially right there. It won't hurt anything. The head gasket will do its job. It'll take care of that. Especially these gaskets, they're 50 thousandths compressed, which is fantastic. So once you get it clean and you clean it one more time, you know, I use either the red rags or the blue towels. Both of them will leave some sort of lint. So just clean it really good and then blow it off with canned air or compressed air that's dry. Don't use compressed air that's got crap in it, because you'll just shoot that all over the surface. And I can see I still need to clean it again. So there's still a couple of little spots on it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to clean it up again, and then I'm going to blow it off. And then under the hood here, we've just got 4 studs in it right now. I got my sealant on this one, thread sealer. Okay, put that on there. Keeps that from leaking. We're going to go ahead. I've cleaned this and cleaned it and cleaned it and cleaned it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to wipe it down with some acetone again. We're going to put just a little bit of oil in the bores. I'm probably going to lower the 1 and 6. Just put a little bit of oil in there so it doesn't start up dry, because I did wipe them clean. I did ridge ream the crap off of them while I was in here. Okay, thoroughly inspected. I've oiled bores. That'll seep down over time over the rings. I've cleaned it and cleaned it and cleaned it. And we're ready to drop the gasket on here, and we're going to flip the head right on here. And I'm probably not going to film that just because I don't want to, you know, try and get the camera in frame with the tripod and all that. You guys can just deal with not seeing that. All right, let's get it in here. Oh yeah, that was fun. That is just, oh man, is that hard. All right, it's in. So we're going to pop the rest of the studs here in. That's actually, I started thinking about that's why they give you that little Allen, so you can thread them in after the fact, because you don't want to try and line all these up. That's just a headache waiting to happen. It's hard enough to get all 4 of those lined up to get it in there, but I got it. So let's go ahead and get those in. Okay, now studs are in. Now what ARP tells you to do, and I've always done it this way, they tell you to use their lubricant. They always include it in their kit. And you are supposed to put it on the washers as well as the nuts. Or if you're using head bolts, you put it on the bolt head, on the cap side of the head, and the washer and the threads. Okay, you don't need to put it on the threads of the studs going into the block though, because we don't need that rotation right there. We need the rotation up here on the nut. So we want to lube it up real well. Don't overdo it and get it all where it seeps down in there and it gets all over the head gasket before you torque it down, because that's not good. You just need to put a little bit, not a lot. It's very sticky stuff. It's like engine assembly lube. And so you just put a little on the bottom, a little on the top, put a little on the threads. You're good to go. So we're going to do that. We're going to put it all on there, and then we're going to go through and we're going to do the torque sequence. I don't think I'll include the torque sequence because this video is already going to be really long as it is. So if you guys want to know how to torque this thing down, I think Alf's Mustang Garage, I think he did it recently using, they were bolts, but same thing. I think that his sequence, though, is different than what the Ford manual describes. We are going to use what the Ford manual says to do. And the Ford manual doesn't have you going crossways. It has you working from the center and then to that one, to that one, to that one, and then I think you go to the back, which didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but hey, it's what the service manual says, and then you jump to the front. So if you want that torque sequence, I have the service manual. I can post a photo of it somewhere. If you're interested in that, I can take a screenshot of what that torque sequence looks like. All right, so let's go ahead and get all these lubed up. All right, let's get this party started, huh? So I was looking at the sequence. I do have it on my phone here. And 1, 2, 3, 4, I think 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then 13, 14, I forget which. I'm going to keep it up here on my phone, though. I really should have printed it out, but, I'm lazy. So let's hit it. And we're going to do it in 3 steps. 60, 70, 80, because that's what ARP says. Got it right here. Okay, their instructions are pretty decent. It says to end at 80, 3 steps. So let's go for it. And they're all hand tight right now. Now this first pull is going to take a little while, and I think I'm actually going to push just to make this a little bit easier. You'll notice I used a deep socket to get some length out of it, as well as an impact extension, because it's stiffer, it's thicker. You get a false torque if you get stuff twisting. We don't want that to happen. So let's go ahead and we'll verify we're at 60, and let's take them up. And I'm going to stop, and I'm going to move on to the next one. They're moving too much for my liking. I want to do it in an extra step here. This is going to be 3. This will be 4. I can feel the studs setting a little bit. 5. 6, 7, 'Little tight in here. 8, 9, 10. And this is what I don't get. I guess the way they get the sequence, it's the only way it can go. 11. 12. 13 up here in front. And 14. All right. I feel a little bit better doing them in an extra step there. It was going to be a little too much. All right, we'll start over, and we're going to let them click this time at 60. Okay. Two. I'll tell you, I just don't have enough room in here, and I might need to get where the camera is, but remember, you want a fluid motion. You don't want to jerk it. Don't do that. You'll screw it up. Three. Four. See, I got that right? Yep, I do. Always double check. 5. 6. Going up here in front and 7. 7. Do 8. Yep. Okay. Moving around to 9. 10. 11. 12. 12. This is only 60. Boy, I'm in worse shape than I remember. And 13 up here in front. And 14. Alright, so you guys have seen what the steps look like. I know what I forgot to mention too. Well, first of all, I lied. The assembly lube is more like a moly grease. And second of all, I don't remember. See, this is the problem. This is what happens when you start getting older. Well, anyways, my memory is either my memory's bad and it was always grease, or my memory is good and studs have a different assembly lube. I don't know. I don't remember. It's been too long, but I want to say the bolts don't have grease. Maybe they do. They might. Anyways, doesn't matter. But anyways, I'm going to go around. I'm going to do the next 2 rounds. You guys don't need to see that. At least you know what the sequence is now. You get to see it a couple of times. So I'm going to take these up to 70, and I'm going to need to stand probably where the camera is. You start pulling that kind of force, it's just you need room. So let me get these torqued down the rest of the way. Well, we're just cruising right along here. So head's all torqued down, and an excellent sign is the second pass at 80, nothing moved. You won't see that with head bolts. You'll see that with studs. So and gives me good confidence that it's nice and even. So we're good there. Bolting the manifold back on right now. This one bolt right here, I couldn't use the factory replacements that I have that have the locking washer on them. They didn't clearance this new manifold. It's not clearanced well enough right here. And so I had to put a regular lock washer, and I just had a grade 8 fastener that I put in there. It's fine. It'll work all right. They tell you to go to 20 foot-pounds with these. You can't get a torque wrench in on half of them unless I take the starter out, which I'm not doing. Look, I can use the old elbow click on these. I know what 20 foot-pounds or so feels like. So get those torqued up, but so far so good. You know, if I had that rocker arm shaft, I could probably have this thing running today, but I don't, and we're going to be patient. We'll get the right parts before we fire it. So I dug out one of my 17 torque wrenches, and I actually do have one that I can get on every single one of these except for the one underneath the starter, and I just did that one by feel. So yeah, you can get in there if you got one that's short enough. This one goes up to 250 inch-pounds, so this is perfect to get in there. All right, the exhaust is back on. I think I forgot to mention this earlier too. They took the smog plugs out to, you know, when they did the rebuild on the head, they want to get everywhere when they hot tank it, and they didn't put them back in, and they're sitting in the back of Kennard's truck, unfortunately, so I'm going to have to go pick those up tomorrow or something in order to get this thing back on the road. I can't run it without those, man. Huge exhaust leak without those because it's a California head. So it's coming along nicely, though. We're going to drop the push rods in next, even though I don't have the rocker arm shaft. Well, actually, yeah, I need that too in order to get this back on the road. We'll throw the plugs in it. I'm going to put the water neck back on it. Probably hook up this heater hose here. I'm not going to put anything on the manifold yet because it makes it a whole lot easier to put those plugs in without the without the spacer or anything on there. So we'll hold off on that. But so far it's gone, textbook. So good stuff. Okay, so next we're going to put the water neck back on. I'm not replacing the thermostat. There was nothing wrong with it. If I needed to replace it, it's easy to do anyways. I'm sure you'll remember, although it's been a while for me, it would have been 15 minutes ago for you. I got new hardware for this. I got a new neck because I didn't like the way the other one fit. It just had a terrible fit for the thermostat itself, and they had siliconed it in there. Don't ever silicone these in there. That's not. You don't need to do that. Don't put silicone on this gasket either. The gasket's for water, for coolant. Don't put anything on there. You don't need to. The only time I ever put anything on there is if it makes it easier to install, where it'll tack it on there. But the fluid seals that. The coolant will seal it up on its own. So don't do that. So it's just going on dry. This I'm going to just wipe that surface just to make sure it's clean, and we'll get this bolted up. And you'll remember I've got power steering here. Here's the bracket for it. So this one's a little bit longer. That's why I got the two different sizes. So we'll get that on there next. So I made what was almost kind of a big mistake, and it would have cost me a Remflex gasket probably. Or, well, I would have had to at least take the manifold off. I forgot to put this fitting in. If you still got this original fitting, it's a bear to get in there with the exhaust manifold in the way. And I had pulled it off on the bench, and I just completely forgot to put it back on. And it was really a tool to get in there. And luckily, I've got the right tools to get to it. Took an open-end box wrench and an adjustable wrench on my box wrench, or my open-end. Sorry, I'm going to confuse the hell out of you if I don't just show you what I did. I had to put this on here like this, and then use an adjustable to turn it, which is not great, but it's enough to get it plenty tight. Otherwise, I would have been pulling this apart again. So we're about tapping out for the day. I can't do anything else. I need the plugs. I'm going to go pick those up tomorrow. And I got to have the rocker shaft assembly. But once I get that, this thing's not far from being back together. So I'm probably going to call it here, and I'm just going to toss a valve cover on top of it just to keep it clean. I might drop the push rods in it now just so they're out of the way and done. And I'm going to put a little assembly lube on the tips of the new push rods and get them situated. You want to put a little bit of something on them. You don't want them going in dry. Even though the lifters have got oil in there, we want something that's a little bit heavier like assembly lube, because it's going to take this thing a minute to build pressure. And I'm going to change the oil. I do not want to run the oil that's in this thing through this. There's no evidence of water in it, but I'm not going to chance it. So we're going to make sure we put assembly lube on everything. The rocker assembly, when it goes back in, all the tips, everything is going to get lubed. Okay, so I do want to show you one thing here. The new push rods, the ends are the same on these, right? Because it's non-adjustable. Okay? They're marked. I'm going to face them all the same way, and they're all going to go in the same way. That way, in the future, if I have to take it apart, I know that one end is all going to be the same. So if I get any of them crossed up, I'll be able to know that, hey, I put the number was on top, for example, when I took it apart, so I know they all go that direction. So at least you're putting a lifter on a lifter side, and you're putting a rocker on a rocker side. So that's just a little tip for you. So we're still waiting on the rocker arm assembly, but I did go ahead and mock everything up because I did make changes. I was never really pleased with the way the Sniper was plumbed for the fuel, and I'm still playing with it a little bit. I still don't know that I like the way I got this line routed, and I've got more vapor guard, so I might reroute that yet again. But I did redo this. I kludged together out of my stash of AN fittings, I was able to kludge together. I had a gauge port already, and 45 and 90. So I kind of turned that down, kind of 45'd up to clear the valve cover, and I had some 1/8 inch stuff. It just happened to have everything I needed to kind of kludge that together. I liked that better. The way it was sagging here, it just kept on sagging and sagging. Eventually the hose was riding on the spark plug wires like that. You don't want that stuff moving like that. So I rerouted. I may still redo this. Like I said, I don't know if I'm pleased with that. I did put a, it's got a nice B-clip under here holding it. But I reused this length on this side. And I don't know if I'm pleased with that yet. So we'll play with that. But yeah, it was just bugging me. I started testing out the ARP bolts that I got for the valve cover. Of course, they don't fit. They don't clearance right. But guess what? Neither would the regular ones. The ones with the 7/16 head on them. It wouldn't clear either. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do about that yet. I got to think on that one. I may not do anything about it. We'll see. And everything else is hooked back up. I don't have the vacuum line on here yet because I've still got to get the vacuum line comes up around here, the hard line, and that's going to be in the way of the valve cover bolts. Like I said, this is just kind of mocked up right now. Just to get the fuel line, just doing whatever I can while I'm waiting for the shaft rocker. I know what I forgot to mention. For those of you that are running the Champion radiator, and we know that the factory type hose is not long enough, I ordered Gates 20661. Fits perfectly. I didn't even have to trim it. It's the right length. Didn't have to stretch it, and it goes all the way on the nipple now. You'll remember that that was never really right, so I went ahead and swapped it out since we had the coolant out of it. So my lack of Ford knowledge is showing. I just did a coolant leak check, and this hole on this side does go into the water jacket. I just didn't even think about it. I just didn't come to mind, and I put it all together, and it's been sitting for a few hours, and I noticed water coming on the bottom of the thermostat housing, and at first I thought, oh, my gasket's leaking. I'm going, man, maybe the surface wasn't good enough. But no, it was seeping through the threads right here. So I drained it, pulled it apart. It had soaked up the gasket real bad. So luckily I got extra gaskets. I'm going to clean it up, and I'm going to put thread sealer on this one. This one doesn't go through. You can check it. I put a screwdriver in here. This is blind. This one goes through, which explains why I could see it coming out on this side. So you got to put that thread sealer, PTFE thread sealer on there, and it's back on. And I had to use a Felpro gasket. I have a few of those. I always order extra gaskets, guys. Always, gaskets are cheap. Get a stack of them, because otherwise you're waiting. There's nowhere you can go and just buy this stuff anymore. So yeah, this guy got thread sealer on it, and I did. I kind of fought it the first time I put it together, and I didn't want to fight it again this time. So I went ahead and I broke that rule. What I told you already, you're not supposed to put silicone on these gaskets. They'll seal on their own. But I did put some ultra gray on the back of it just to hold it onto the head, because I fought it last time and I was being stubborn. So this time I broke it out, and I'll tell you what, it made it 10 times easier, because I just stuck the gasket to the head and got the thermostat and the housing right in there. So it was a lot easier. So you can do that. It's just, I was making the point that, those gaskets should seal on their own. So anyways, you can use a little bit to hold it in place. So that's taken care of. This earlier was leaking right here out of this flare. It was coming up the nut. I finally broke down and bought a pressure testing kit for radiators. I've wanted one for years, and I finally broke down and got it. So I'm not going to refill it. I'm going to pump it up with air when that kit comes tomorrow, and we'll put a little soapy water here, and we'll see if this is still leaking. But I got it tightened down pretty good. It's not seeping anymore, but who knows what it's going to do when it's under, 14, or well, actually it's got a 13-pound cap. So, 10 PSI, 12 PSI, whatever, we'll see what it's going to do. I've always wanted one of these. We had one in the shop back when I was making my living working on stuff, but I've never personally owned one. And these things are super handy. So it's got a pump and a gauge and a quick disconnect and all the fittings to hook it up to your cooling system. And you know, I mean, it's a Chinese whatever. It's fine. For home use, this will absolutely do more than what I need. So these are all for like the screw type ones, the newer style radiator caps, and these are the older style ones. I assume this is probably the most common one right here. This size, number 3, would be the most common one, and I think it also looks like it comes with a thermometer too, so you could check your temperature. I'm betting that fits. Probably seals down in here or something like that. I'm not quite positive. The one that we had back, you know, sound like old back in the day. The one that we had was you hook this up and then it had a needle that you put in like this. It was similar to this and it had holes in it. And that's how you pressurize it. It would just seal like that. Didn't have a quick disconnect like this. I like this better. That other one was not as easy to use. And that one you hooked up to an air supply, which is fine. You know, I've got air compressor and everything, but this is just easier just to have a little pump. You know, you only need to put it up to 10 psi or something if you're checking for leaks. So anyways, yeah, this is an Amazon special. You know, Hecho in China, my favorite. And we'll give it a shot here. So we're set up here. Pretty easy. You know, you just put the fitting in there, put the quick disconnect on there. This is your pressure relief right here. And you just pump it. You know, I've got, 9 psi in it right now. That's plenty for what I'm looking for. And there's a couple different ways you can attack this. You can just wait for a while and see if it loses pressure on its own. In my case, well, I could do that too, but in my case, I know that this fitting was leaking. I actually had to take this off. You'll remember earlier on, the housing was leaking. We went ahead and we fixed that just by simply putting sealant on the threads for this bolt. Something I didn't think about that I needed to do. And this, I took it off. I Scotch-Brited it better than I had it, and I put a little bit of PTFE sealant on the flare because the surface is pitted a little bit, and that looks like it sealed it right up. And I use an old trick. I just put a little bit of Windex on there, and if it doesn't bubble, which it's not leaking. So it's nice and sealed up now, so we'll clean that off. And I'll leave it pressured up here for a little bit, and we'll see if it loses anything. Looks to me like it's holding right steady at 9, so I think that we're in probably pretty good shape. There's no reason to really take it up much over 10 psi or so. This normally has a 13-pound cap on it. You definitely don't want to go past 15, 16 because that's the limit of these systems. They don't want to be any higher than that. Okay, so we went ahead and we filled it up all the way with coolant. Just as another double check, I took it up to about 11 psi, and it's rock solid. It's not moving. I'm not seeing any seeping anywhere. So this is just a decent check to do, a pre-start check. The last thing that you want, now on this, it's not so critical because it isn't really a fresh rebuild, but on a fresh rebuild, when you're trying to break in a cam, the last thing that you want is a coolant leak or something where you got to shut it down in between. That's just, you don't want that to happen. So this is a good pre-check to do. You pressurize the system up, make sure everything's sealed. You don't have any major issues. This is a good check to do. So I think we're in pretty good shape now. So we finally have the last piece to the puzzle. This is from Rocker Arms Unlimited. It's a standard non-adjustable rocker assembly, which is far cheaper, and I don't need the adjustable one. We've talked about that. Rebuilt Rocker Arms Unlimited, man, they are awesome. Just absolutely awesome. And I think it's probably one of the only places you can get this. I'm sure any machine shop could do this, but this is their specialty. This is what they do. They shot peen the stands, they replate the shafts, they bore out the rocker arms, and they bush them. They've got bronze bushings in them, which is way better than factory. I'm trying to show it here too. It's probably a little bit difficult to see, but we'll try and get in on it there. The lighting is not great, but They are all bronze bushed. You will notice too, and I imagine this is probably because they didn't have enough of the same spring. These springs here have more coils than these. The pressure, the rate is going to be the same. It's just a different material with more coils. That's not going to hurt anything. Here are the rocker arms. The tips have all been properly ground and dressed, machined. This thing is ready to go in. So we're going to do a few things. We're going to put this in and we're going to check the clearances, because you'll remember I did change push rods. And I want to make sure that there's still enough travel left in the lifters. I did talk to Jeff Jones just because I wasn't sure if these motors are different. And they're very similar, actually. Pull this over here to these lifters. This is out of a Dodge 318, which is kind of interesting. I could explain where I got this to. This is actually a lifter out of one of the trams for one of the old parking lot trams from Six Flags. When I worked there, they still had trams. They don't have them anymore. But that's where this guy came from. And it was a collapse lifter that we changed at one point or another. And they have 200,000 travel in them. So very similar lifter to what's in this motor. So we're going to make sure that we have, after talking to Jeff Jones, we're going to make sure we have anywhere from 100 thousandths all the way down to 30 thousandths. It can be as low as 30 thousandths. I wasn't sure of that number. That's why I asked Jeff, because he's the expert, especially with these motors. So we're gonna bolt it up, and that's how we need to get the lifters bled down, and we're gonna do that by bolting this up and putting it max lift on a couple of lobes. Let the lifters bleed down, and then we're gonna check what's left. So, anyways, let's get this thing installed. Few notes on installing it. I already cleaned up the original bolts. They're dry right now, so the original bolts are still in good shape. I'm going to use them. We will be lubing the threads with some motor oil just to make them screw in easier and torque down easier. I believe these go to 45 foot-pounds. We will also be putting assembly lube on the tips and in the balls, and we will be using my oil can, we'll be putting regular motor oil at every rocker arm, every bushing. I'm not going to pull the distributor and prime the system, so I've got to make sure that I oil all this stuff really well, but it should come up to pressure real quick, so I'm not too concerned about it. We'll make sure we fill the oil filter. So let's get this thing installed. I just want to show you guys something here real quick too. Hydraulic lifters, right? They're all pumped up because they've been extended with oil near them for a while. Okay, now that I've put the shaft rocker on here, and I just tightened it down for right now, I haven't torqued it yet, and I got to look at one more thing I'll show you in a second. Watch my dial indicator. See, I've just got it on the tip of the rocker right there. As the rocker comes up, it's pushing the dial indicator in. So that's the lifter bleeding off. You can see the bleed off time. Now the manual actually does tell you how long is acceptable. It's what the shortest time is, because if they bleed off too fast, that's not good. If they don't bleed off at all, that's also a problem. But this is a way that you can't really visibly see it, because you can see, you know, it's maybe moved 30,000 since we started, 25. So I can actually measure it and see when it's done bleeding off, and it'll get slower as time goes by. Now, the other thing I got to look at, the new rocker shaft that they sent me, because I didn't send mine in to get rebuilt, it doesn't have that extra oiling hole right here. Now, I don't think that matters, but I don't have a hardened washer to go in here. So I'm going to have to use this, and I'm probably going to reach out and ask about this before I say that it's good, although I don't think that it's a problem. But because I could potentially take my old stand and put it in here with this. I don't think that this matters, though. But I'm going to find out. I will verify, just because I'm not so familiar with these. But everything else, it bolted right up just like it should have. Got assembly lube on everything. And the last thing I'll do is I'll take it, I'll put oil everywhere along here, some engine oil. We're going to drain it. We're going to put the valve cover back on, and that'll be that. But we do need to measure. We want to measure these clearances after these things are done bleeding off. And then what I'm probably going to do is rotate the engine, probably 90 degrees or 120 degrees, and then let it sit for a little while. I want to get them all bled down, because if I don't, they will do it on their own, but it's going to run like crap, because there'll be valves hanging open. So we're just, we're going to make sure we get them all bled down to the right bled all the way down, and then I'll check them with the feeler gauge here. Okay, so I talked to Jeff Jones, Vintage Engine Works. By the way, if you need a engine builder, I mean, he's the guy. He's up in Fresno, and he ships everywhere. So he's actually not too far from me, you know, I mean, relatively speaking, he's like 6 hours, I think. But I just asked him real quick, you know, I said, there's no oil hole here in the stand. He said, that's 68 and older that has it. He says, if the new one has it, doesn't have that in the stand, he said, you don't need it. So I'm just going to use this as the washer. It's not moving. When I torque it down, hopefully it doesn't move. I put oil under it. I don't have any hardened washers, so that's just how it's going to go together. And as far as preload, I've got 30 thousandths travel left, and that's the minimum that's allowed. So I think we're going to be in good shape with these push rods. One last note, this is why you always go back and check the manual before you just assume something. These are 30 to 35, not 40 or 45, whatever it was I said. I think I said 45. 30 to 35 foot-pounds is what it says. I went to 35 with them. So after very careful consideration, I have decided that I am not going to change the oil beforehand. I don't want to starve the top end for oil for very long now. I could solve this by taking the distributor out and priming it, but I'm not going to do that. The oil has zero evidence that it ever had coolant in it, and if it does, it's not that big of a deal because I'm going to change it in 5 minutes anyways. So we're going to run it with the old oil, and let me see what else. We've tightened the fuel line up. I installed the Scott Drake valve cover that's I'm sure going to leak, and that should do it. So I'm going to turn the key on. I got the remote start here because I don't trust the oil pressure gauge in the car, and I got a mechanical one under here that it's going to be much faster than that. So we're going to turn the key on. We'll let it, I already flushed the line. I primed it and let it flush. We're nice and tight. We'll turn the key on. Let's get it primed up here, see if there's any fuel leaks to speak of. Let's see. Oh, you know what? Forgot to plug the fuel pump relay in. I unplugged it so I could jerry rig it to turn on the fuel pump. I just jumped hot to the fuel pump. So, like, why didn't I see my fuel pump turn on or hear it turn on? Okay, yep, we got pressure. I don't see any leaks. Well, let's take a look. Everything's clear. Let's give her a shot. Ooh, that does not sound good. Does not sound good at all. Okay, I need to take a look at a few things. Sorry about that, folks. Sometimes the criticality of what you're doing outweighs the video, and I had to make sure I pulled the valve cover off, made sure I didn't bend any push rods. All that was happening was there was probably a little too much prime fuel potentially, and it coughed. So I just wanted to double check that I didn't have any valves hanging open. Now it sounds fine right now. I'm not hearing anything weird. It's going to smoke a little bit because the paint has to cure over here. It fired right off the second time I cranked it. I didn't want to do anything else till I checked it. And so I'm sorry I didn't share that with you, but that's just the way it goes sometimes. So we're gonna let it bleed. Quite frankly, because I bled the air out of the heater line, it's probably not got much, but we're gonna let it do it anyways. I gotta run it for 10 minutes. Let's keep an eye on the temperature. 115, so far so good. So we're just gonna wait it out here and see how she runs. I'm gonna have to change the tune, so Aaron, if you're watching this, you're gonna have to help me because the tune is gonna change. So let's just let it warm up. We'll give it 10 minutes, like I said, and then you have to shut it down for 20. That's the header paint, or the manifold paint. That's just the way that stuff works. It's gonna stink for a little bit. So 10 on, 20 off, 20 on, 20 off, 30 driving. That's it, it's cured. So it sounds great though, and it looks to me like it's idling just wonderfully. It sounds smoother, it sounds quieter. The only thing I hear is the fuel injection. So, you know, damn, I think this thing's ready to rock. It's definitely running good. All right, so we've gone ahead and we've waited the required 20 minutes for the paint to cure on the exhaust manifold. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to fire it back up. We're going to run it for 20 minutes this time, and then off 20 minutes again. I think what I'm going to do is drop the oil right now first, though. So we'll drop the oil, throw a filter on it, and fire it back up. Okay, so before we do the 20-minute run on this thing, we're going to drop the oil. We're going to change it first. I don't want to run any longer on this, although I don't think anything is wrong with it, but I'm just being overcautious, kind of like when I started it up and I thought that we had a valve train problem, but we didn't. Let's see what it looks like. Well, this is fun trying to do this like this. Jeez, how long is this thing? There we go. It looks normal to me. Let's see. If it had water in it, it would be at the bottom, so of course it would be mixed up and it would look like chocolate milk right now because we just got done running it, so I don't see a problem. It's interesting that the head gasket was leaking as bad as it was, and there isn't anything in the oil, but you know, it wasn't cracked or anything, so it was burning off the coolant before it could get into the oil. I'm pretty certain. You know, the only thing that caused this whole mess is these idiots that rebuilt the thing didn't clean the bolts. You know, you have to chase the threads if you're going to reuse the bolts, which I really don't like doing anyways. I see bolts as a one-time use kind of a thing. If they're torqued to yield, they absolutely are. But, you know, I don't take any chances because it's not worth my time to chance it. So it's just like putting studs. This thing really didn't need studs, but I know studs will seal, and they just torque so much better. So this looks good. We're going to drop the filter. For you guys that don't do this, I always do this, and I started doing this when I was in fleet maintenance. Mark the filter, put the mileage and the date on it. You know, that way you have some idea the last time it was changed. So this is a Wix, made in USA. These are excellent filters. I either use these or Royal Purple. It's just the price fluctuates, so I just pick whichever one's cheaper, but they're both really good filters. And you'll see I marked the mileage and the date. So now I don't have to write it down anymore because it's on the filter. So we're going to fill it up now, and let's fire it. And by the way, this is what I run. It's a matter of preference. This is Royal Purple HPS, and this is zinc fortified and phosphorus fortified oil. It's synthetic. It's full synthetic, which is really good, but you have to, with a flat tappet cam, and really anything that has surfaces that slide, it's really very good for them, like the rocker tips, shaft rocker. It is good for that, but it's really for the cam. Flat tappet cams have to be zinc fortified or ZDDP. And if you don't do that, you're going to eat a cam. And it's especially important when you fire it up for the first time. You go to do your break-in for 20 minutes, you know, at 2,500 RPM or so, you know, you vary it. That's very critical. You got to use break-in oil, and it needs to be proper zinc fortified. Like I said, this is my flavor. I like the Royal Purple products. AMS oil, excellent products as well. You know, like I said, just preference there, but don't just go and buy Walmart Special and dump it in your Inline 6, because you'll end up eating your cam eventually. So don't do that. All right, full of oil. Let's go ahead and fire it back up. Sorry you guys missed the first start, but I was being extremely cautious. Just keep an eye on our oil pressure. It will take a few seconds for it to come up, likely. Man, that thing starts so much smoother now. And there's our oil pressure coming up. It just seems to run better. It comes to idle much better. I was having that weird problem with it earlier. Let's make sure we don't have any oil leaks. It's having that weird kind of didn't want to idle problem, and it wasn't smooth, and it seems to be just absolutely fine. There will be a little bit dripping on the ground when you wet the seal, and then you pre-fill the filter and you wet the seal with oil. It always leaks just a little bit, but I'm not seeing anything spraying out anywhere. And our oil pressure is, right over 40. Good stuff. Real good stuff. This thing just runs so much smoother. Wow, what a difference. These inline sixes always have a little bit of shake to them. Because the intake manifold is a joke. It's not even a bad design. It's worse than a bad design. It's a joke. The exhaust is right underneath the intake. It's long. It draws from the center. It's an absolute joke. But, it's a good novelty. The engine runs. They run great. They can take a beating. They got 7 main bearings in them. The 200s do. They're great engines. They're a joke for power. But I'm fine with that. That's good stuff. So we got to give it 20 minutes idle time now. I'm pretty confident in the coolant level. The coolant temps were looking good. It got up to 190. The thermostat opened. It was down to 160 and started coming back up when I shut it down because we got to get this paint to cure. So we'll just wait it out. We'll see how it is. We'll drop it in gear here in a little bit and see how it runs. I get the feeling I've done a lot of engines, and I can tell when something's right. I don't know why it kicked back on me that first time. It could have been overfueled from prime. It could be one of the valves was hanging open. That's probably most likely because there's so much preload on those lifters, and there's more than there was, and they had to bleed off enough to get, they had to bleed off enough so the valves would be closed. It's possible one of them was hanging open, but it was weird. I pulled the valve cover because I'm just so cautious, and nothing's bent. I checked every push rod. I rotated it by hand, and I had done that before by hand, and I didn't feel anything. I checked it with a feeler gauge. I'm doing everything right, but I just wanted to be cautious. I got in and turned the key, and it fired right off like you drive it every day. So just goes to show you, overcautious is better than not, though. We have a very big problem that is a very small problem. This is what I get for making fun of Paul. The freeze plug in the back of the head's leaking. And I really don't want to pull this head back off just because it's got a leaking freeze plug. So I guess there's going to be a part 3 of this video. It's all back together. Runs beautifully. Smooth as it's ever run, which is no surprise seeing as the head gasket was leaking. That darn freeze plug on the back there is leaking, and I knocked it in a little further. I got my 1/2-inch extension that I use for doing transmissions, and put them all together and whacked it a few times, and it slowed it way down, but it's still leaking. So there are 2 options. One I don't like, but will probably work, and I don't have to pull the engine out or anything. All I got to do is just get the old freeze plug out of there, which might be hard. They make these rubber expansion type plugs that can go in there. I don't really like using that, but it would probably work fine in this application. That's one option. The other option is I really don't want to pull the head off. It's got a good seal. I'm just not a fan of doing that. It honestly is easier to pull the engine out. You pull the radiator, pull the exhaust, 2 bolts, 2 nuts on the exhaust, take the power steering pump off, unwire a couple of things, and take the fuel line off. And, then you get your motor mounts. I mean, it really is not that big of a deal. The biggest problem I have is I don't have a cherry picker down here right now. So I've got to think about this. I may, just for the time being to get it driving, I may put that rubber plug in the back, but we'll see. If I knock the freeze plug in and I can't get it out of the head, well, then I'm screwed. I'm going to have to pull a motor. And I don't really like the idea of using one of those either. It's really not right. That's me wanting to be lazy, I guess. But I've heard those work real well. So we'll go ahead and call this part 2. There probably will be a part 3. We got a special treat coming tomorrow. We're doing a job with my best friend that I've known since junior high. We're working on his car, so that'll be fun. So anyways, we'll go ahead and wrap this one up. It didn't end the way that I wanted it to, unfortunately, but they don't always, It's just, some things just don't always go the way that you want them to. But I am pleased with the way that it's running. It's idled for quite some time. I've revved it a few times. It sounds a hell of a lot better than it did. Valve train's silent. So I think we're in pretty good shape.